I'm Scott Alan Miller. This is my daily life living in León, Nicaragua. I get questioned pretty often about whether or not you should be driving and how you're going to get around the country if you come here to visit Nicaragua, especially if you're going to be coming as a tourist or a first-timer coming to visit. Maybe you're looking to do some investigation and you might want to stay, but you're still on that early investigation level, so you're acting much like a tourist or behaving much like one in how you're seeing the country. So for people who are doing that, a lot of times they're thinking that because they're coming from North America, then the way that you would approach this in nearly any part of North America, unless you're in like New York City, is that you would rent a car and drive around. Should you do the same thing? If you're coming to Nicaragua, is navigation, is driving safe? Like, is it easy to do? Are these things, can you even do it legally? Are cars even available for rent? Is your license good? A lot of things that people have questions about. So let's talk about that right after the bump. So a couple quick things about just what you are allowed and able to do. If you're coming from anywhere in North America, including all of Central America and Panama, and in reality, most of Europe and South America, and probably most places in the world, in general, you are able to use your driver's license, assuming you have one, and drive here in Nicaragua. Driver's licenses are broadly allowed from other places, and definitely if you're coming from anywhere from Panama to Canada, you are good to go as far as legality. We drive on the right here, the same as the rest of North America. All of our roads throughout this region directly connect one to another. We don't have any of those weird crossover things as you change from right to left or anything like that. Even Belize, which is part of the Commonwealth and a former British colony, and Eastern Nicaragua and Honduras, which were former British colonies, do not drive on the left. We all drive on the right, so we all have the same standard as the United States and Canada. So as far as all those things go, and as far as the general driving rules, as far as signals and standards and all that, you're basically uniform throughout the entire region. So from that perspective, being able to drive is relatively easy and straightforward. As far as can you rent a car? Yes, you can absolutely rent a car. Car rentals are not super popular, but if you're at the airport, if you're at one of the major car dealers like Casa Pellas, or if you're at some of the big hotels such as the Hilton Doubletree, just happens to be one I know, there are car rentals available there. Some of the towns that you can go to throughout the country will have car rentals as well. I don't know how many are going to have this, but I'm pretty sure that Granada still has rentals because that is the major tourist hub. Managua, of course, I just mentioned the airport and the hotel there, and San Juan del Sur. Outside of those, if you're in, say, León or Estelí, you may find that you're not able to find a local rental, or if you are doing so, it's just from a person rather than from a rental agency. So that could add some complication. Now, if you know someone or someone comes highly recommended by someone you trust, it's a little bit different. But in general, renting from an individual person can add a lot of just stress and complications to the situation. You generally want to go with an agency. However, sometimes those can add a lot of stress. We've not had the best luck with some. Now, we have some that we are very happy with, but some that will go unnamed because they do threaten you and put you in danger. We will not, but they do exist, so watch out for them. It's very easy to search who tries to claim your cars are stolen once you rent them and uses it to make extra money and threatens people who talk about them. I generally don't rent cars from too many agencies, but I have a few that I do like. I do work with Alamo, and I do work with Enterprise and Budget, and a few that have been fine. Now, sometimes it's very costly, and that's really one of the things you're going to run into here in Nicaragua is the cost. There's two main reasons why, along with, just the overall stress of navigation or not knowing what you're doing or wanting to be able to look out the window and instead having to drive. There's lots of reasons why you may not want to drive, but of course people will jump in with, but I want the flexibility and freedom of driving, and if you come from North America, you're really used to that, so it's something that you may want to keep. Absolutely, totally makes sense. But there's two main reasons why I'm generally going to say you may want to reconsider driving in Nicaragua. The first is just the cost. Renting a car here is a premium. It's not something that is normally done. Not very many people do it. And so you're going to be paying quite a bit of money in order to do that. That generally is not why people rent. Most people rent cars because they want to do something cheaper. They're willing to take on extra work for themselves in order to save money. So if you're thinking of it in a, well, I'm visiting New Mexico on my weekend vacation, of course you're going to rent a car. That's what makes sense in the United States. It's cheap to rent compared to most other things. But when you're coming to many other countries, most of Europe, most of Latin America, it's going to be flipped a little bit. So you're going to find that renting is quite expensive, but other options are probably pretty cheap. Here in Nicaragua, we have really good public transportation, both inside the cities and between the cities. It may not be the most luxurious and fancy and may not be the best organized, but we have really good, reliable runs going all over the country at extremely low cost. So if you want to take public transportation, almost always you're able to do so. A few tourist destinations do get a little bit harder, such as San Juan del Sur, which admittedly a very large number of potential tourists do want to go see. And so that will present a little bit more of a challenge. Of course, that you want to get that to a very far part of the country that has a very small population. The public transportation systems do exist, but they are much more limited and take a lot more time. However, for those kinds of places, we do have private shuttles that are designed around tourism, and they are far less expensive than renting a car in many cases, while being quite a bit more expensive than taking the regular public transportation. If you have a large family, you're taking like 5 people and you're cramming everyone in a car, the car is going to save you money, at least on a one-way trip. But if you are individual, almost never would that be the case. Any expensive shuttle or even private driver is probably going to be cheaper. Most importantly, though, in many cases, the cost of renting a car is equal to or less possibly than having a private driver who comes with their own car. And if you have a private driver, of course, you have a lot more flexibility. You have someone to drive you around. You have someone who knows their way around, someone who's going to deal with just everything that has to do with getting to and from different places. And you don't have to worry about any of the overhead of renting a car because they come with one, or maybe they rent one or whatever. Plus, they can change vehicles when they need, because many times the private drivers will have access to cars or vans or whatever, depending on who they're picking up and where they're going. There's a lot of reasons why you'd want to do that. Of course, if you're driving yourself, you have that flexibility of having one additional person in the car and so forth. There's reasons that you could go either direction, but it's surprisingly cheap to have a private driver. Once people price that out, it's pretty rare that you actually want to drive on your own. That's the lesser of the two reasons why I would not drive. The bigger reason, and this is the one that came up recently, I think it was this morning or maybe yesterday, in one of the videos that we had about the incarceration of Allison's husband, who spent, I believe, 72 days in a Nicaraguan jail, not prison. Now, theirs was not because he was driving. Everyone associates it with that. But this incident has highlighted that when driving, now we have talked about this previously, is not how we found out about it. This is a standard Nicaraguan law, and a lot of countries are like this, which is why generally we don't drive when visiting most countries. But as a tourist, this would be extremely acute in Nicaragua. If you are driving and you get into an accident where there's a grave injury, right? This could be death, could be really serious accident where they're concerned that you would be a flight risk, then there is a very real possibility that you will be held during the time that they are doing an investigation. Now, typically this is 48 hours. It is very limited. It is not a scary thing. Of course, anytime you're going to a jail cell for 2 days, it feels awfully scary. And I'm not saying that I would want to do that and it would be a trivial thing, but it's also not the end of the world. It is a relatively reasonable thing that many places around the world do when there's a major accident, to make sure that people don't take off when they find out that they might be guilty or just don't want to deal with it. And that is something that Nicaragua has had a lot of problems with foreigners doing, so they have to be relatively careful about that, especially because people who are injured in accidents here don't have a lot of financial resources in most cases, and it's very important that they track down the people who are at fault. So if you are taking off and making a run for it, they want to avoid that if at all possible. So that is something you need to be aware of, and accidents here do happen often. That you have life-threatening ones is not that bad. Like it's a pretty safe driving environment. It's a little bit like slow-speed bumper cars. So there's a lot of little accidents all the time, but really bad ones are relatively rare. Not super rare. It's about the same frequency of really serious accidents involving bodily harm as, say, driving in the United States, which is pretty good in general. The difference is the United States has many fewer accidents in general, and those that they do have tend towards more serious. Nicaragua has many more accidents in general, but the ones that are serious are much fewer within that pool of overall accidents. And when it comes to how many highway deaths per mile driven, they're roughly the same. So two different ways of having accidents and going through the driving experience, but the results being relatively similar at the end of the day. Okay, so all that said, that does put a damper on a lot of driving. Now, a lot of people, tons of people do this every day and don't worry about it at all. Very, very rarely does someone have to deal with this. And just because you're in an accident doesn't mean that it will happen. It's just a possibility. But it's enough of a possibility that it does scare a lot of people away from driving for good reasons. And if I was a tourist in Nicaragua, I wouldn't do it. If I was on my vacation, I wouldn't want to take a risk of 2 days in jail that may cause me to miss a flight, may cause me to miss the family vacation, really disrupt things, ruin a vacation, all because of, now obviously an accident that triggered that would also ruin a lot of things anyway, but it just is that much more to go wrong, especially when you have the potential of getting lost, the potential of paying more for the rental, the potential of just not knowing what you're doing and doing something wrong, the potential of having to deal with, and remember that police stops, while very low key here in Nicaragua, are random. It doesn't require or even suggest that you're doing anything wrong to be pulled over. But if your rental car doesn't have the right stickers on it, you could end up having your license taken away. And I literally know someone who had this happen in the last 2 weeks. So this is not some fringe, like, well, it could happen, but it never really, no. Rental cars can easily be missing some of their documentation, and when you get stopped for a documentation check, you're required to know what that documentation has to be, and you're on the hook for it. You may not be the one that gets the fine, but you're the one who's going to have your license taken, and you're going to have to travel to Managua and make an impassioned plea of why you need your license back and all this stuff, which of course won't be a big deal unless you're on vacation and don't have a lot of time and don't know how to do that and don't have access to any resources. These are real problems, things that would make me really hesitate driving if I'm only here for a short time. Now, I live here, I drive, I don't worry about those things at all. But I also have a lawyer. As someone said to me on my threads, they're like, yeah, of course, what you do, Scott, is very different because you have resources. You have lawyers to call. You have family who lives here. You have people who know what to do. You're not in, and you're also not a flight risk. So a lot of these problems just aren't that big of a deal. If someone comes and takes my license and it goes to Managua, I don't panic because I know exactly what to do, and I can just make a call and take a bus and go pick it up and pay a small fine. It's not the end of the world because I can basically behave like a Nicaraguan, sort of. But to someone who's on vacation or doesn't know what to do, these things are scary and time-consuming and confusing. And I remember the first time that I came to Nicaragua, that I was moving here. I guess not really the first time. I'd been here many times. But the first time that I was really coming in, and we brought a lot of things with us, and I had to deal with the aduana or customs control over a period of time. I ended up spending most of a week stuck in Managua trying to do things in Spanish, really stressed out, very confused, had no idea if I was doing things right or wrong. It took a lot of work to be able to get things addressed, and that was just a simple customs thing where the worst case scenario was they were going to either fine me a lot of money, basically taxes, or they were going to keep my stuff. That was kind of the worst it could be. They didn't have my driver's license. I wasn't personally in any trouble, nothing like that. So if imagining how stressful that was, now if I had to deal with the same thing, it'd be no big deal at all. And I wouldn't worry about it. And then I was moving, so even then I wasn't that worried about it, although you can go back and watch my old videos and be like, yeah, he didn't like that. That was not a good experience. But the idea of being here for a short period of time and not having the flexibility of just, oh, yeah, I'm going to spend a couple days dealing with that. This is my life now. So, it's all very cool and chill. No, you're going to be, if you're on vacation, it's very stressed. So once you move and you're going to be spending real time here, even if it's just your second trip and you're coming down for a few months, yeah, renting a car, reasonable. Even buying a vehicle, potentially, reasonable. Driving around on your own, reasonable. That's fine. But if you're coming down on your very first trip, or you're coming down for a very short period of time, you're coming down with a lot of family members, and one little thing, it doesn't have to be a big accident, just some little thing is going to seriously disrupt your trip and ruin your entire vacation, I would skip it, right? Nicaragua is a small country with limited resources for these kinds of things. And so while they shouldn't be scary, they shouldn't be stressful, I mean, any country that you're in that you get into an accident or something like that is going to be a certain level of stress. Even if no one gets hurt, you're worried about it, you're concerned about it, you're hoping those things don't happen, you don't want it to happen on your vacation. That goes without saying. Nicaragua, because of the limited resources and the small country that it is, everything has to go centrally through Managua. Things take a few extra days. They're used to processes that are a little bit more manual. They shouldn't stress you out, but the need to run to Managua, to get around the country, these are little extra things that if you're local, if you're like me, and someone said you have to go to Managua right now, and you don't have a car, you don't have anyone to deal with, I can really easily call a taxi or walk out to the street. I can even walk to the bus if I have to, but I can get a taxi or a ride with someone out to the bus station really quick and easy. I'm there in 5-10 minutes. I know exactly how to get on a bus going to Managua. I know exactly how to use the taxis or the InDrive and the other tools to get around Managua, and I can walk Managua if I need to. I'm not worried about walking through the neighborhoods. I'm not worried about speaking Spanish. I'm not worried about finding the right office. There's all these things that I'm not worried about at all, and most Nicaraguans are not. They all know that for a couple dollars and a couple hours, they can get to Managua pretty easily, and it's just not a big deal. But if you're a foreigner and each little piece of getting a taxi, getting a bus, knowing where to go, knowing what the terms mean, plane, speaking Spanish, all those things are stressful. That little tiny thing that Nicaragua is not expecting you to stress out about could be really, really stressful. It could result in you being stuck somewhere. You didn't understand the directions. You got off the bus at the wrong spot. You're stuck in the middle of nowhere. You know, I have no idea how to get picked up, and you have no idea how to reach anyone, right? Maybe you don't have a cell phone that works universally, and you're stuck trying to find Wi-Fi somewhere to just send a message to ask for help or to reach someone that you know. So many tiny things can go wrong when you're on vacation. Having a car as an extra potential point of failure, I just generally don't recommend. So absolutely, if it's something that you go through this information and say, you know what, I'm cool with all that. I'm willing to take on the risk. I'm not very likely to have an accident. I'm not going to panic when I do. I'm okay. That's fine. Absolutely, you may drive when in Nicaragua. There's no reason to feel that you can't. But it's important to understand that generally most of us recommend against it until you're going to be spending some time here and are able to kind of learn the ropes so that the little things that would stress you out or ruin your day won't really impact you that much. And that's really the person who left me the comment said I really needed to highlight that maybe driving was not something that should be recommended. People really need to understand that things can go wrong dramatically, and that could cause a level of disruption or problem that, while should be in many cases maybe a little bit obvious that if you have an accident in a foreign country that it's probably going to ruin your vacation, but people don't think about it because they're used to how you would drive and deal with stuff in the United States or your home country, whatever that is. And when you go to a new one, in many cases it's so easy to rent a car and possibly so cheap that it never really occurs to you that you may be paying a price premium or putting your journey in jeopardy unnecessarily, and you haven't thought through what those risks are. Yes, I think the risks here are a little bit higher for drivers than the average place that you would go to, at least in this part of the world, but they're not really that severely high. It's not really that big of a deal. The situation that people reference all the time, Allison's husband, that was a really famous case that happened in 2024 here in Nicaragua. We got quite a wind. It's blowing over my camera. We're going to move just slightly so we can keep going. Did not result actually from him driving. The situation that he was driving and had an accident triggered a situation where they then got scammed by fake lawyers who scammed them on a bunch of things in the process and got them to voluntarily put themselves into a dangerous situation. They were truly scammed. They didn't do any of it intentionally. They were trying to be good people the entire time, and it was a mixture of just really bad situations where they had no resources, had no idea who to reach out to. You guys, just by the nature of watching this video, know that you can post in the comments down below and get help. You can come to our WhatsApp group. That information's in the comments and get help there. People are doing that right now as I'm making this video. You can email me. That's in the show notes, right? There's all these different ways you can reach out to me alone just by and you could post on the show, and even if I'm not available, other people from our community would help you pretty quickly find a lawyer or figure out what the law is or figure out what police station you need to go to. So you have resources that they did not. They were not familiar with our community here. They had lived here but didn't really have neighbors and resources to bounce ideas off of, to tell them when a lawyer was not, probably not a real lawyer. They didn't know what website to go to check the lawyer's credentials, things that no tourist would know, but they weren't tourists. They lived here. But because they lived here, they had a car and they didn't really think through these risks. So they kind of knew about them, but they hadn't really internalized that they needed to be ready. So they didn't have any of the resources that you would expect. And then when their neighbors who knew that they didn't have those resources, knew that they were in a precarious position, they took advantage of the situation. So they had neighbors who knew a lot about them and knew that they didn't have the resources expected of someone who had lived here for a while. And they took advantage of that situation and tricked them and got those people to trick them further. And then it triggered a medical emergency and it became a really big thing. So at the end of the day, yes, a car accident that they were not at fault for triggered the beginning of a really big disaster. And had they not driven, yes, it would have protected them. But it wasn't the driving that was actually the problem in their case. Yes, had everything else gone perfectly, he would have spent the 48 hours in jail just hanging out in a police station waiting to find out what was going to happen. They would have done the investigation. He would have gone to court and he would have come out unscathed with just a really annoying weekend that legitimately would have been a terrible, stressful weekend, but it would not have been the disaster that it ended up being. So don't worry from that video or that series of events that something so horrible might happen to you. Watch my commentary on them, and we really do break down why they were at so much risk, and most of it was for medical reasons, right? Things that you would know ahead of time that you don't have those medical or similar medical conditions and you're not at that kind of risk for that kind of thing. There was just somebody is going to have a really bad day anywhere in the world, and they happen to have one of the worst ones of 2024 here in Nicaragua, and it became a big story. And it is an important story to learn from, but it's also important to learn from it that it doesn't apply to most people. So highly recommend, consider alternative options. We're a country where they don't expect you to drive yourself. There's such great public transportation. The average Nicaraguan, even the average expat in Nicaragua, doesn't generally drive themselves. We have other options. It's so cheap and easy and safe to get around on public transportation, semi-public transportation, or private drivers. That's what we generally recommend, especially if you're here just for a short time, and especially if you have family with you and you want to be able to be confident that you're going to get a good, safe, happy trip and not have to have extra stress and worry about things, or worry that things are going to get ruined for you. So, as always, if you have any questions or comments, you can either write down below. Definitely just jump in and say hi, introduce yourself, ask questions, leave comments, but also check the show notes. We have instructions on how you can make a video of yourself and send it in to me so that we can put you on the show and have you be a part of the community and actually have your face on the show, which is super cool. We love doing that. As always, if you want to support the work that we do here, we're going to put a link up here to buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. That helps to pay for all the, there's a lot that goes into making the show. We also have a community membership where you can join. We do have a private chat group that gives you access to. Once you let us know that you've done it and you're signing in to Nika Habla, we'll get you into the private chat group. But mostly it's just $5 a month to sponsor the show, help make this all possible. And that's really it. Tell someone about the show. Consider coming down to visit Nicaragua. Think carefully about whether you really want to drive or not. Send us an email, do something, say hello, join our WhatsApp group with all the expats. The information on how to join that is also in the show notes. Really, the show notes get you a long way. We don't sell anything, so go look at the show notes. It's mostly good information, plus, some links to my other YouTube channels, which I'd love if you guys watched and signed up for as well. And you can also support us just by watching another episode and hitting that like button. That helps a lot as well. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you all tomorrow.